no one sitting in it. No one at all. Okay, all right. And these are the transparencies I'll use for today. All right, so I'm going okay. Okay, the very first thing we're going to talk about is the election of 1828. So I guess I'll put this up here right now as well. And we see, look, it says election of 1828 there. See, election of 1828. Now let's make it bigger. We don't need. Whoa! So that, pushing it too hard there. Okay.
Excuse me.
All right, that's good enough. All right. Okay, so now we are all ready, except for a pencil, and I can get going. Oh, what? Yeah, so that's not. Mitchell, I'm going to only read the names of the people who were here on Tuesday. If you weren't here on Tuesday, get ready to raise your hand. Ruhi?
Here.
Eric?
Here.
Courtney?
Here.
Jinda?
Here.
Aaron?
Here.
Surprise, all the people who were here on Tuesday will be here today. Jonathan?
Here.
Charles? Adam?
Here.
Michael?
Here.
Ian? Cindy?
Here.
Joseph?
Here.
Corey?
Yeah.
Mr. Kim? Where's Mr. Kim? Here, but doesn't want to be. That was the saddest year I've ever heard in my life. Would you agree with me? Is that a sad sounding year? Let me try it. I got to make it sound like I really don't want to be here. Here. I was anywhere else on earth. That's right. You know, you could leave it anytime you want. You've got your attendance. Plus. But you aren't allowed to do other things on computers except taking notes. You're not looking like you're enjoying yourself in the slightest, so it's okay. He's got it. He's got that look down. If you can enjoy yourself on the computer without looking like you're enjoying yourself, it's okay. I look for the smiles and the little quiet laughter. That means you're on Facebook and enjoying yourself way too much. Okay. He's okay. So he passes. I don't mean for the class. I mean, well, maybe you probably do. I don't know. I haven't looked at your grades. I don't know. He's doing incredibly well. All right. Good. Congratulations. Sam, you read the textbook, don't you, sir?
No.
No? You're taking notes from me and studying from my notes? Really? And getting an A?
That's what I do.
Well,
I do.
you're supposed to only be able to get a B when you only take notes and don't read the book. That way it makes sense as an anecdote. See, if you want to do better, you're supposed to read the book. Oh well. You're going to have to read chapters 9 and 12, I'll tell you that much. Because there'll be no lectures on that. Okay, moving along. I'm glad to hear that. It's kind of nice. Sam?
Here.
Paul?
Here.
Well, there you go. Daniel?
Yeah.
Take that as a compliment. Thomas? Thomas? Stephen?
Here.
Sandra?
Here.
Shalina?
Here.
Roxanne?
Here.
Joe?
Here.
Ms. Scott?
Here.
Jeremy?
Here.
Nicholas? Vivian?
Here.
Jessica? Now, hands. Not called. Name not called. Last name, please?
Brashear.
Yeah, okay. Did you say Brashear?
Yes, I did.
With an R?
With an E, R-A-S-H-E-A-R.
What did he just say?
Brashear.
Yeah.
B as in boy.
B as in boy.
Yes.
Brashear.
Yes.
There again, very good.
Thank you.
With miscommunication. All right, next. Last name?
Robinson.
Yeah. Bobinson. Okay. Next.
Tablet.
Yeah. Anyone else? See, I told you, I skipped a lot of names, but those people aren't coming to class. And so, no use wasting class time saying their names. Questions before I get started? For anyone, anything you want to ask me before I get rolling? Anything at all?
Were you happy with the election outcome?
No, no one I voted for won. Not a single person. Among all that, I voted straight party, and basically there was no one to vote for straight party. I voted straight party Democrat. There weren't any Democrats to vote for. The two Senate seats were not up for running. The House of Representatives was unopposed Republican. My House representative was unopposed, and my House Senate was unopposed, with no Democrats running against any of them. So I voted for nobody, except the governor, who lost.
Got killed.
Everybody I voted for lost. Okay, and now we have our fascist, hates the president, wants to see from the Union, 14 years in a row, governor for life, basically. Congratulations, Texas. Okay. This is the only person in the entire state who could be our leader?
I can't believe that in Texas, that many people realize.
And I'm a natural Republican. It's just that the Republicans in Texas are arrogant bastards who are doing an awful job governing our state. So I don't vote for people who aren't incompetent.
And he's not even, I mean, in the Constitution of Texas, you're not supposed to be able to be governor that long, It's a loophole that he's able to even do that.
What's the loop? I thought there were no term limits.
Well, I mean, there's no term limits, but I mean, like the way it's set up, you already have 8 years as the longest, and now all of a sudden,
it's going to be an awful long. 14 years seems like a long time. It does seem like that's longer than FDR as president of the United States. So it's going to be an awful long time. Oh well, there we go. So I did my civic duty and threw my vote in the toilet. Okay. Election of 1828. A lot of people felt they were throwing their vote in the toilet then too. And Americans have often felt that way. The election of 1828 is a very interesting election. It allows me to teach another lesson about elections. Very often elections aren't about the issues. They're about personality of the leaders concerned. Especially in 1828, once again, there's only one political party. John Quincy Adams, the man who probably shouldn't have been president in the first place, who's just finishing up 4 very unsuccessful years as president, is trying to run for re-election. And the man that most Americans feel should have been president in the first place, Andrew Jackson, is now running for a second time to get what he feels is his right from before, from the previous election that was contested. The two candidates don't really differ very much on the issues. I guess the only issue that existed back then that I know anything about at all was the tariff. That's an issue that keeps showing up in the book, although you don't get many test questions about it from me. Okay, you don't have to worry about all of the confusing pages of the book about the issues of the tariff. I don't see them as very important. The Civil War didn't start because of tariff disputes, so it's slavery I talk about, not tariffs. All right, but that was an issue, and both candidates were on the same side of that. If two candidates are running and they have this, their position on the issues is very similar, then people start basing their decision on personality. And these two men's personalities and backgrounds were very different from each other. What I'm talking about is that this was the first of our dirty mudslinging campaigns, where instead of trying to prove to the electorate that you are the better candidate, your supporters try to prove to the voters that the other candidate is stupid and evil and bad and wrong and naughty and everything. Now, of course, you as the candidates never publicly criticize their opponents, do they? That makes them look small, doesn't it? The idea. So you use your supporters to throw out every kind of lie possible. McCain never accused Obama of not being an American citizen. But Republican supporters of McCain threw that out on the internet as much as they possibly could. They don't have a reputation to support. They're anonymous supporters of a candidate. And so when you have elections like this, what matters, to use a colloquialism, is whether the poo-poo sticks. Both sides are throwing poop at each other. Sometimes it sticks, sometimes it doesn't. Okay? The candidate that gets more of it sticking on him loses. It's very, very real. This is the first time this happens in America. There have been many elections like that since, state, local, and national. So let's start with the successful attempt by the supporters of Andrew Jackson to attack John Quincy Adams' personality and character. Let's start with the very successful efforts by Andrew Jackson's supporters to tarnish the reputation of John Quincy Adams and attack him, his personality, everything but the issues. Then we'll discuss the unsuccessful efforts by the John Quincy Adams camp to attack what's wrong with Andrew Jackson's personality. Attacks which fail not because they are true, but because they backfire anyway. Backfire, blow up in your face. Could very often happen. The Andrew Jackson supporters accused John Quincy Adams of being, they depicted him, they represented him as a cold, elitist, aristocratic scholar, an intellectual. Americans don't like intellectuals. We don't like intellectuals. We like regular, everyday guys. We want intelligent people to act regular like us. We don't want them to act smarter than us by using lots of big words in a row and showing off their scholarliness, their professorial tendencies. We tend to call such intellectuals in this country eggheads. You've all heard that phrase before, haven't you? A phrase that has a very nasty origin. Does anyone know the origin of the phrase egghead? It comes from Nazi Germany. When propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels was asked early in the history of the Nazi Germany what he was going to do about the fact that all intellectuals in Germany were opposed to the Nazis, he pulled out his handgun that he carried with him, and he showed the back end of the gun. He said, "You know what happens when you hit a person's skull with a gun? It smashes like an eggshell. That's what we're going to do to intellectuals. You break their skulls open, they don't speak anymore." That is, the force is more powerful than words. And yet we pick that phrase up in America very much. Not because we're violent like that, but because we don't like intellectuals. Okay? True or false? For the last 2 years, Obama has been acting like a professorial, intellectual type president. And it's losing him massive amounts of support. Even people who still support him are now soft and weak and tepid in their support. They're no longer excited because we haven't had many professorial presidents. Woodrow Wilson was seen as a professor in office. He was a professor before he became president, and his speeches were professorial. People used to make fun of him for that in the newspapers. Americans can't identify with people like that. And everything about that is true. He's the son of a former president. He was born into wealth. He's a relatively cold, extremely intelligent, scholarly kind of person who would probably be looked down on you as his social inferior. Those attacks were true, and they stung. And they guaranteed that he would lose the election. Meanwhile, Adams' supporters had ammunition to throw at Andrew Jackson as well. They accused him of all sorts of horrible things. They accused him of being a drunk, a gambler, and a murderer. Now, there's something about those three things. They're all true. But it ain't going to hurt him in the election at all. Now, back in the day, they used to call it a drunk. Nowadays, they call him an alcoholic. And, back in those days, didn't basically everybody drink most of the time anyway? Yep. Much more than we do today. How can you tell someone, from the modern definition, I guess everyone was an alcoholic. What's the old-fashioned definition of an alcoholic you might get from a 1950s or 60s TV show? Who could tell me the old-fashioned definition of an alcoholic?
Keep doing the same thing, expecting different results.
No, that's the modern one. No, someone who drinks during the day.
A lush.
Okay, a lush. Someone who drinks during the day. You're drinking before lunch. You're drinking after lunch. You're drinking before dinner. You're drinking after dinner. That's the old definition of a drunk. The old definition of a drunk woman was a woman who still drinks in the 9th month of her pregnancy. Do you remember in the 60s they used to make fun of, oh, she's still drinking. It's her 9th month. Because normal women stopped in their 6th or 7th month. They'd also smoke cigarettes right up until the 9th month. Okay, well, things have changed, of course. So Andrew Jackson drank incredibly heavily to be accused of being a drunk and for people to believe that. A gambler, he was. He was born into great wealth, but he lost his family's wealth a number of times. In 1819, he blamed his financial problems on the panic of 1819. Modern scholars have investigated that and found that he lost all that money in gambling and whores in the old-fashioned way. Okay. Spending it on horse racing. And a murderer. That's a little different, too, because, back then, you did not go to the authorities if someone committed violence against you, your friends, or your family. The authorities and court cases were for contractual disputes between businesses concerning property rights or such like that. What did you do if somebody actually engaged in violence against you or your family? You engaged in violence right back at them. Okay, that was the manly and right thing to do. Nor were there things like police and sheriffs engaging in crimes and criminal investigations back then. Okay, it just wasn't possible. You guys understand you can deal with a case involving property disagreement, can't you? It's there. You can investigate it. You can look up records. All right, for many reasons, so the idea of, in many ways, in fact, poor people got into fights, and rich people had duels. And a wealthy man like Andrew Jackson, would it not be surprising that he fought a number of duels? He shot to death 5 men in duels during his life. Now, a duel is not quite the same thing. It's honorable. You face each other. You count. You turn. There's a second. There's people watching. There's rules you're supposed to follow. Not that he ever did. 3 of those, you know, if you wished, you could simply fire into the air, like Alexander Hamilton did, to show that honor had been served. Both men could fire in the air. They both stand up for their honor, and they could move on with their life. Aaron Burr shot Alexander Hamilton straight in the head. Burr said he was also lifting upwards, but it misfired on the way up. Andrew Jackson chased 3 of these men down and shot them in the back dead multiple times. Bam, 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 bam! Not so dually. Okay, what am I saying? I would not vote for him if I was alive then in 1,000 years. I would be a founder of the Whig Party designed purposely to destroy the career of arrogant bastards like Andrew Jackson. Or Rick Perry. These are of the same type. Rick Perry has a lot of people he dislikes. He hates Obama. He hates this. He hates that. And lots of Texans hate those people too. And we all had a lovely hate fest. And re-elected the guy full of displeasure and unpleasant attitudes about just about everyone. Because lots of people have those unpleasant attitudes. And how many American men do you think drank to excess back then? Almost everyone. How many American men would relentlessly engage in gambling the moment they had any money at all? Almost all of them. And how many of them had engaged in serious violence at some point in their life? Almost all of them. We're getting somewhere now. All these attempts to attack him are actually making him look like a regular guy, which he's not. He's an extremely wealthy man with an advanced college degree who's been an elite his entire life. But if people want to present him as a regular guy to attack him, then he's going to take that as a badge of honor and wear it. Okay? I am a regular guy. Okay, I guess I am a regular. I'm trying to sound like I'm actually very rich and famous and important, but I'm trying to sound regular. They accused him also of, the thing about those accusations were that none of them were false. They weren't slander. But generally, it's very easy to slide into slander when you're attacking someone. All you have to do is exaggerate a bit. And so the final group of accusations were the worst. They accused him of being an adulterous, illiterate backwoodsman. There. That hurt a lot. Only the first one. Even the illiterate backwoodsman, they claimed that he was born in a log cabin. Interestingly enough, I hope many of you realize that later candidates would use that as a way to get elected. Abe Lincoln, born in a log cabin. He's like us. But elitists like Jackson and upper-class people from New England hadn't quite realized that yet. They thought people would say, oh, born in a log cabin, he's not an important person. I shouldn't elect an important person to office. Was Andrew Jackson born in a log cabin? A very big log cabin with great big white pillars in front of it, with dozens of rooms and chandeliers. Okay? He was wealthy, and his parents were rich. But what the heck? You want to say I'm a regular guy like you and me? I'll accept that. Finally, adultery. This brings me to my discussion about whether to ever use sex and sex scandals in politics to bring down political enemies is not usually a very wise thing to do. It has a huge tendency to blow up in your face and make the person you're accusing of sexual misdeeds gain sympathy from the voters. And people will look down on you instead as a tattletale, excessively moralistic person, snobby. What the word I'm looking for? Prude was the word I was looking for. Prudish. Yes. Sympathy is a very powerful tool to use to get what you want. I'm no good at it. In fact, I'm virtually immune to it. But there you go. I'm going to be telling you a private story about my life in a little while. Andrew Jackson did something. He married his second wife, who was a young, pretty, beautiful, skinny little thing, before his first marriage's divorce was finalized. Okay, so it doesn't mean that much to us today. But back then, it meant for a period of a few months, he was an adulterer, married to 2 women. Okay. Now, I mentioned what happened. Did I mention what happened to beautiful, skinny, young wallflowers back then, in the old days? They died young. There's no medicine. If you're skinny and thin and good-looking back in the old days, you die young. You're a flower, and flowers don't last long. They wilt. Okay? Most men were smart to marry big, fat, sturdy women. When the horse got sick, you put her on the plow and carve and plow that field. Okay? That's the kind of woman men needed, you know. Farm women. Good immune systems. Strong and healthy. All right? When the news broke, it so crushed Andrew Jackson's young bride's spirit that she died before the election was held.
What?
She died of a broken heart. So Andrew Jackson achieved massive sympathy vote. This is what you have to be careful when you're attacking people. People's personalities. You might end up causing people to sympathize with the person instead. What happened to Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky? It was bad, and it was hurting his reputation until the Republicans went too far and tried to impeach him for office for simple sexual dalliance. It wasn't enough, and it ended up causing the American people to turn against the Republicans and side with Bill Clinton instead, feeling sorry for him now. Okay. When I was in grade school, we had school presidents and class presidents. And I ran for class president, making all sorts of wild promises about no homework and such like that. So when the teacher counted the votes, she first announced that all votes for Joe had been voided. There's no democracy in education, thank you very much. But we then had a school right election, and as I remember, there was a nerdy guy running who had practiced his speech and come up with good ideas, and he gave a great speech, but he was just a nerdy, relatively unattractive little guy. And one of the more handsome, good-looking, blue-eyed, blonde kids in the school was also running for president. I think his name was Matthew. And he got up there, and we were in one of the old-fashioned auditoriums, and he experienced a massive wave of stage fright, began to blub, and ran off the stage. So everyone voted for him, of course. They felt sorry for him. And then the next day, he had to go around giving his thank you speech to each class, and he was very embarrassed. He didn't really feel like he deserved the job. So during recess, I went up to him and I said, Matthew, don't worry, I didn't vote for you. You ran off the stage without giving a speech. He said, thanks, Joe, that means a lot. Okay, so there you go. I'm not quite the same as most people. All right, enough of that wasting of time. One way or another, Andrew Jackson's going to get his chance now. He wins with 56% of the vote. That is an overwhelming landslide in this country. No one ever gets 60% of the vote. You'd be running against a dead man to get 60% of the vote. That's what Rick Perry got, 56%. And Mark White only got 40%. That's so low that Mark White's political career is now over. He will never be able to run for public office again. Okay.
Bill White.
Bill White. Bill White. Whatever. That guy I voted for. Bill White. His political career is over. That's why so many of these candidates ran unopposed. Democrats don't want to run against a Republican and only get 35% of the vote and then commit political suicide. Their career's over. Okay. No one is ever going to let somebody who only got 35% of the vote ever run again for their party. And so these candidates just go unopposed. Again, of course, and anybody vote for the Libertarian? Did anybody vote for any Libertarian candidates in this room? Even though, because it was the only candidate opposed?
Kinky Friedman was running that way.
Yeah, but he wasn't a Libertarian, he was an independent. I said Libertarian.
Ron Paul.
Like Ron Paul, the most famous of all Libertarians. Yes. All right. 178 electors to 83. And now Andrew Jackson is President of the United States. He's President from, his first term is 1828 to 1832, and his second term is 1832 to 1836. He was a strong leader, by which I mean he wasn't a wishy-washy person. He would decide what he wanted to do, and then he would take those actions. Unfortunately, like a lot of strong leaders, he was a weak thinker. That can be very dangerous. I think we can all agree that the second George Bush was willing to take strong actions when he felt necessary. Too bad he wasn't able to think things through very well before he made those strong decisions to invade this country and invade that country. It requires guts. But you also need to have some brains balancing those guts. Okay. Okay. So first we had a brainless president, now we apparently have a gutless president. Sad to say, I am sorry. about that. He's got 2 more years. Anyone hear Obama's press conference? Did anyone listen to his conference except me?
A little
No one else did. It was a virtual concession that he's not running for re-election.
Yeah.
He was defeated. Bill Clinton didn't do that in '94. Bill Clinton co-opted every Republican idea that had just won, claimed they were now his ideas as always, smiled at the camera, and rolled towards re-election. Because he was that kind of a guy. Perhaps Obama's just too nice and honest for his own good. So he was being honest in front of the cameras. He was destroying his political career right in front of me by being an honest, nice guy. No. Okay. And the reporters could sense that, and we're trying to let's see if he'll say the next wrong thing. Let's see if we can make him say something else he shouldn't say. And he said a number of those things. Maybe he'll come out of it. I think he's depressed right now. But we'll have to see. A weak thinker. And he was basically guided as President Jackson by a series of hates. People he dislikes, groups he dislikes, institutions he dislikes, which he is going to destroy or push back if he can. He hates the Indians. He hates Indians in every way. And this keeps him popular because, remember, first of all, women couldn't vote. Basically, white men voted in America back then, and they didn't like Indians. So his hatred of the Indians helps make him popular. He also hates a group who we will talk about later, the abolitionists. He hates abolitionists. He hates damn interfering Yankees who want to end the slavery system, which he deeply believes in. Okay. And so we can also set up Andrew Jackson as one of the first of what I'm going to call the modern 19th century racists. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later. That by the 19th century, there were now many Southerners who actually believed that if you asked George Washington what he thought about slavery, George Washington would have said it was a necessary evil. He would have accepted that from a moral point of view, from a Christian point of view, it is difficult to support slavery. But it is part of our economic institution. I inherited these slaves from my parents and grandparents. What am I supposed to do with them now? Would have been his lame excuse, but it would have been an excuse. Andrew Jackson would have said, black people are naturally inferior to white people. It is a good thing for them to be slaves. They should say thank you. Slavery should spread to the rest of the earth. It is a positive good, he would have said. That's a change in position, showing us once again that as time goes by, slavery does not soften, racism does not bend, it gets worse and entrenched. We'll be talking about that more later as well. And he had a third hate as well, the Bank of the United States. Now he realizes that unlike the Indians, the Bank of the United States is a powerful institution that can defend itself. So he's going to wait until his second term to destroy the Bank of the United States. He's going to do everything he can to destroy the Indians in his first term, as he knows that will be popular. Okay, so that leads us to the next study guide term. The 5 civilized tribes and the Indian Removal Act of 1830. But once again, this is actually 2 study guide terms, isn't it? It's 2 study guide terms, but they're related, so I put them next to each other. Clearly, it would be a smart thing for me to do to talk about who these 5 civilized tribes were first and say some things about them so we can represent them as human beings before we go after them and push them off their land, the Trail of Tears, and shove them all in Oklahoma. There's no use trying to expect you to feel sorry for people if you don't know anything about them first. Okay, so Southern Indian secessions and removals. Can't even use secession anymore when it comes to the Cherokee and the Trail of Tears. That's not a secession. It's a removal by force. Forcibly kick somebody out of their house and make them go somewhere else. It's not a secession. So first of all, we want to talk about who the 5 civilized tribes are. Okay, there's a test question on that to see if you know the names. I'm going to make you memorize the names of 5 Indian tribes. Oh, this class is so hard. I'm having to memorize sometimes 5 or 6 things. That's me. It's my satire making fun of you for criticizing one of the easiest classes you'll take in college. All the other classes require you to memorize a lot more, and they're more difficult, like math, science, foreign languages, all more difficult. Okay, you're welcome. The 5 civilized tribes were the most famously of all the Cherokee. The Creek Indians were pretty well known as well. You've probably heard of the Seminole of Florida. And unless you are a gambler, and until those casinos were built, you probably had never heard of the Chickasaw of the Choctaw. Choctaw Casino is up Central Expressway. The Chickasaw Casino is called the WinStar, and it's up 35. Okay, and they're both casinos on Indian reservations in Oklahoma. So those are the 5 tribes: the Cherokee of Georgia, the Creek of Alabama and Georgia, the Seminole of Florida, and the Chickasaw and the Choctaw lived further west in Mississippi. Okay. I'll get back to that. All right. By the 1800s, Indian peoples and white Europeans have been living alongside each other, known about each other for 300 years. That's a lot of time for cultural assimilation, for ideas from Indian cultures to migrate into our culture, and for our culture's ideas to migrate into theirs. When people live next to each other, they interact with each other and learn from each other. It's inevitable, even if they're enemies sometimes. They're friends others. These were the 5 most famous tribes of the Southeast. Southeastern part of the United States, the 5 civilized tribes. That gives you a theme for it, doesn't it? The 5 civilized tribes had assimilated into Western civilization rather thoroughly. That doesn't mean they had abandoned their culture entirely, but they lived a life far different from you might think. The Cherokee were farmers, they had towns, the buildings were made out of wood and stone, the towns would have newspapers, maybe an opera house, a post office, a sheriff, a mayor, a general store. The men wore suits, the women wore dresses, most of them had converted to Christianity. Maybe they wore a feather in their hat to show their Indian heritage. They have economically integrated fully into American society. Many of them own slaves. They run businesses. They buy and sell with the white man and back and forth. Okay? They're not living in teepees. They're not wearing loincloths. They look and act Western. They've been in real economic contact with the West for hundreds of years. Okay? These are not the Indian tribes of the Great Plains who haven't even come into contact with the white man yet. Okay? The Sioux, or the Apache, or the Comanche. These are the civilized tribes of the East who've been in contact with Europeans for hundreds of years and have fully economically integrated. Assimilating is the word we use. They spoke English. They engaged in commercial, for-profit farming. The wealthiest of them owned slaves. Okay? Now, they're not American citizens. If you are a Cherokee, you are a citizen of what nation? The Cherokee Nation. These are countries, just consider them very small countries, with really very small populations. Because the Cherokee never had more than 20,000 people. Matter of fact, when the Library of Congress reported the statistic that before Columbus there were 20 million Indians living in America, everyone in the scholarly world knows that is false. It's just that there has to, if there were once 20 million people living in North America, and a few hundred years later there are only 2 or 3 million left, that's a Holocaust, isn't it? How about if there were 2 or 3 million people living in America when the Europeans arrived, and then a couple hundred years ago there were 2 or 3 million of them, and today there are 2 or 3 million of them? Well, don't populations naturally grow? But it's a more difficult, subtle argument, isn't it? Dumb people aren't going to be able to figure that out. So exaggerate, inflate the number of Indians by 10, and then you create the ideological political argument you want to make, so that it's strong enough. But if there were 200 tribes of Indians in America, and none of them had more than 20,000 people, you do the math. You don't make it to 20 million, you make it to 2 or 3 million instead. It helps explain why they lost the wars they fought with the white man so quickly. They were hopelessly outnumbered. Okay. But they certainly all had rifles and houses just like the same as everyone else. All right, and remember, we already mentioned this before. If I'm from France, can I come to America and buy an American business?
Yes.
and engage in the same kind of commercial relationships as a Native American with American citizenship? And can I defend myself in court if my company is sued for some reason? So I can participate and have all the rights as an American even though I'm not an American citizen? And that is true for all other normal countries around the world except for communist countries like China, for example, or Iran, that normal average countries that have normal relationship with each other all allow foreign people with money to invest in each other's countries, right? So these Cherokee have all the same rights as anyone else even though they're not American citizens. Okay. Please realize that legally in our Constitution and other constitutions. You don't get to trample over someone just because they're a foreigner. Oh, you're a foreigner, I get to punch you in the face. No, it's still a crime. All right? And you'd be surprised how many far-right Republicans don't think that's true. Okay. Obviously, a liberal Democrat would accept that because they believe in tolerance. Toleration. All right. So, these Cherokee have, for example, deeds to the land. There are Cherokee lawyers as well. They are fully assimilated. There are college-graduated Cherokees who are lawyers. The landowners have deeds. It's their land. Okay? They're not hunter-gatherers who don't know what paper is. Okay. All right. Very good. And they had some of the best farmland in the South because they were here first. They were here first. They had the best farmland before the white man arrived. And when the white man arrived, we didn't just jump at them and grab their land. No one does that, no matter how aggressive they are. If one person's got a piece of land right there, and there's empty land all around it, would you just attack that person or settle peacefully anywhere you feel like? You'd settle peacefully, wouldn't you? For many, many, many decades, Americans just settled here and 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 here. There was no problem and no intense desire for the Indians' land until we'd settled all the rest of the land. Then once we settled all the rest of the land, we now coveted their land, which was the last remaining free land east of the Mississippi. The last remaining land east of the Mississippi that had not been settled by the white man are these 5 pockets. They're quite productive land, most of it is. And we begin to realize also that we surround them and we outnumber them. We surround them, we outnumber them, we don't respect them, and we want their land. So it should be inevitable what's going to happen next. What's going to happen next is that Andrew Jackson is going to push through the Congress a obviously unconstitutional law called the Indian Removal Act. The Indian Removal Act of 1830. The Congress authorized the President to use whatever means necessary, including armed force, to evict all the Indians east of the Mississippi and make them all move west of the Mississippi. It would be a kind of a forced land exchange. I'm going to force you to sell your house. I will pay you for it. And then I'm going to make you move somewhere else where you don't really even want to move against your will. You have to move there. And I'll give you some land free of charge. It's not very good land. Nowhere near as good as the land you were forced to give up. Take it or get shot dead.
So they actually paid them before they...
We'll discuss that as well. I wish I could say yes to that, but in fact I have to spend a few minutes explaining it. In fact, don't we not agree that back then even white Americans had problems with paper money that they did not believe was real currency? What do you think happened when an Indian was paid for his land with paper money? It's not just, oh, I know not what this is. Use it as toilet paper. So did most white people.
It has no value to it.
Yeah, and if you move from one state to another, it loses all value, which is what we were making them do. On the other hand, there were Indians who were paid in silver and gold. They would have accepted that as real value currency. And have been much luckier than the other Indians who got paper, who would have thrown it out the window or on the ground as being absolutely useless. So there you go. I wish the answers were easy, but they're not easy. Everything is complicated. Everything is subtle. Except for Andrew Jackson, he's not very subtle. This is clearly an unconstitutional law. I will deal with this in a little while, but please realize that if there's a group of people who everyone hates, let's say very unfairly, the Mormons. And so I want to pass a law against them. The voters mostly dislike them. I, as a politician, am not going to pay a price for that illegal law, am I? Not a price at all. Okay? If in a democracy, if the majority dislike a group of people, that group of people is in big trouble. It would be better if they didn't live in a democracy. Because the politicians, most of whom are weak and soft and want to get reelected, will do whatever the majority wants done. Okay. So certainly Andrew Jackson is not going to suffer the slightest from pushing this unconstitutional law. Covetous white Southerners who want that land, are they going to vote for Andrew Jackson now 2 or 3 times in a row if they have a chance? Not just once. They love him because of this. It gives them money and wealth. Now, some of these tribes, look, the Chickasaw and the Choctaw have never been a very numerous tribe. They weren't as large. They didn't have the numbers of the Creeks and the Cherokees. They didn't have any money. They could read the writing on the wall. They knew they did not have the force to resist the white man. And if you can't beat them, join them. So they took the money for their land and voluntarily moved across the Mississippi to the places in Oklahoma that we had promised the Indians. That we would give them the entirety of Oklahoma because Oklahoma stinks. Sorry. And farmland, it's not good. It's not good farmland, really. Okay. Oklahoma is farmland's not so good. It's pretty rugged territory. It was so far west, Americans hadn't even reached there. We haven't even settled Arkansas and Louisiana fully yet. Oklahoma was beyond the vision. That would get them so far away we wouldn't have to worry about them anymore. Okay. By doing that, at least the Choctaw and Chickasaw would not be marching across the country in chains with officers at gunpoint pushing them along, but could organize their own migration. For example, in summer, I hope you know when we forced the Cherokee on the Trail of Tears and why it's called the Trail of Tears. Because we waited to midwinter and then forced them all to march, hoping they would drop dead, which most of them did. Well, the women and children. Now the Creek Indians decided to resist. Let's fight because that's the honorable thing to do. Even if it means defeat, at least we will be defeated honorably resisting the aggressor, defending our own land, which is clearly ours. And while the Creek are fighting the Georgia militia, no, obviously the Creeks actually lived here as well. That's a little mistake in there. While the Creeks are fighting the Georgia militia, they're doing just fine. But then Andrew Jackson sends divisions of the American Army. And very quickly the Creek are defeated and forced to migrate to Oklahoma in far less positive conditions. Now, I can't decide who to do last, Cherokee or the Seminoles. And they both teach very different lessons. I think I'll do the Cherokee first. And in fact, let's go to the study guide. As you can see, the 2 most important things I have up here are the Seminole War and the Cherokee lawsuit. So let's cover the Cherokee lawsuit in the first place. Cherokee have lawyers who know their constitutional rights, that the Indian Removal Act is clearly and obviously the most unconstitutional law ever passed in the United States. And so they sue. And it goes all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is made up of a lot of John Quincy Adams type Democrats who don't like Andrew Jackson, who feel that Andrew Jackson thinks he is the democratic elected dictator of America. And so the Supreme Court obeyed the law and ruled the Indian Cherokee lawsuit unconstitutional. I wish that was the end of the story. Because as I said, in a democracy, if 90 people hate you and you're 10 people, it's 100 people in a country, and 90 of them hate you, and you're one of the other 10, what chance do you have of justice? None. You'll have more justice in a dictatorship. That's why our Constitution and the Bill of Rights is more impressive to me than our democracy. Big deal. Democracy. 51% of the people vote to put 49% of the people up against the wall, shoot them in the head, and pass their money out to the other 51. That's democracy. Clear democracy, not very pretty. Without the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, our democracy is barely worth believing in the slightest. With it, we have a nice country. When the newspaper men rushed over to the White House and said, Andrew Jackson, the Supreme Court has just ruled the Indian Removal Act unconstitutional. What are you going to do about it? He had a very pointed question he asked the newspaper men. He said, gentlemen, how many divisions of the American Army does the Supreme Court command? No. There you go. There's his answer. He is going to simply send the Army in and kick them out anyway. Supreme Court is just 9 old guys in robes. If the people with the armed forces behind them don't want to obey 9 guys in robes, I don't think those 9 guys in robes are going to be able to do anything about it at all. Okay. And so we just ignored our own rules, and Andrew Jackson went in there with extreme prejudice and told the army to be brutal in rooting the Cherokee out. Wait till the winter, don't pay them any money, force them into chains, and march them in icy winter conditions across dozens of rivers in the worst conditions imaginable until they are in Oklahoma. But during that time, about 1/4 of all the Cherokee died. That would be the women, the children, and the old people. And of course, we didn't give a damn. They're not really human beings, they're Indians. So it doesn't really matter. And we can follow that theme now down to the Seminole War, which is why I do the Seminoles last. Remember, I told you that if you go to the Library of Congress, you will find documents where we forced the Indians to sign a dotted line and they sold their land to us. It's our land. Maybe not fair, but legal. But that is not the case with the Seminole. Seminole did not lose the Seminole War. They never signed a treaty with the United States. All that part of Central Florida is still Seminole property today. It's owned by the Seminoles. Although some Seminoles were captured during the war and ended up in Oklahoma, other Seminoles remain and are still there today. In fact, that land is now so valuable, the Seminoles don't really live there. They rent it out to orange growers and make a great deal of money as absentee landlords. You may know that many sports teams have names that today seem kind of mean and racist or unfair. And that I went to a university, Marquette, we were the Marquette Warriors. What are we now? Marquette Golden Eagles. Because Warriors seem kind of unfair, okay, to the Indians. Can we example the sports teams who've changed their names?
My dad used to, when he lived in New York, he went to Penfield High School, and they were the Chiefs.
The Chiefs, and that also has been changed.
Yes.
There's a better example that I'm missing, yes?
High school, they were the Chiefs, but they changed it to...
And that's gone on all around the country, changing from these names. Huh?
Why don't Major League teams?
Yeah, that's next, and that's getting there. Interesting enough, let's talk about the most racist of all of them. There's 2 teams. First of all, the Washington Redskins.
Yeah.
The Washington N-words, just as much. Now let's point out that that Washington area is 2/3 to 3/4 African American. And those African Americans love their Washington Redskins, and we're very angry to have that team's name changed. Because they ain't Indians, and they don't really care about prejudice against Indians, they care about prejudice against black people. How about the Cleveland Indians? Have you seen their drawing of the guy with the gigantic nose, like the Warner Brothers cartoons? Yeah, that's totally wrong, but they haven't changed that either. However, that has nothing to do with the Florida Seminoles. Now, is calling yourself the actual name of a tribe instead of just chief or warrior unfair? No, it's honorable, and they have a contractual agreement. That university is allowed to use that name by paying the Seminole tribe a considerable amount of money, and an actual Seminole chief is their mascot, and he's wearing the authentic costume, and he's doing it voluntarily. So there's nothing wrong with that at all. Okay.
But they no longer have him like ride and spear the ground and stuff anymore.
They don't allow them to do that?
I don't know if it's not allowed.
It used to happen, but now they feel it's not quite.
I think that it's more about the portrayal of them.
Oh,
He's
yes.
spiking the ground with a spear.
Well,
and
it
all
has to
that
do with
stuff.
history. Now let's talk about that, because now let's talk about something else. This is Florida. It's the 1800s. Air conditioning has not been invented. Those are the Everglades. How many Americans covered that land? How many? None. Before air conditioning, Florida you didn't want to live there, like Houston. It was absolutely unproductive land, useless to anyone. The only reason Andrew Jackson would want to clear out the Seminoles is because the only good Indian is a dead Indian. There's no economic value to this. In fact, a war where we are going to send tens of thousands of American soldiers into the swamps of Florida, the Everglades, is going to be an extremely difficult war, possibly impossible to win, and extremely expensive. To drive the Indians out of land, nobody wants. And the war lasted 5 or 6 years. It cost more than the Louisiana Purchase or the National Road. It was one of the most expensive things America had ever done up to that point. Costing tens of millions of lives, thousands of casualties, and it was impossible. The Indians could use the swamps as unattacked, the most defendable material imaginable, the most perfect example for hit-and-run guerrilla attacks. Attack the American army and disappear in the swamps. They can't chase you. So we lost that war. When the war was over, we just stopped attacking them. They still own that land today. That's theirs, the Seminoles. And so there's a good example of going too far with your prejudices and losing as a result. Even if you have all the power of the world, you can still push things too far. All right. That's the Indian Ruble ad. No, I'm sorry. We paid the Cherokee $5.5 million. They just didn't want to leave. They liked where they were. Okay. Now, we then gave them Oklahoma forever until oil was discovered in Oklahoma in 1905. Then we took the rest of Oklahoma and forced them into a bunch of tiny reservations along the Red River where there was no oil. Okay. So it was only Indian Territory in 1905. 1907 it was opened up. That's why if you go to Oklahoma, the earliest date you're going to find any buildings is 1907, because that's when they were supposed to all wait, and on a certain day, in 1907, the American government was going to open up the entire area for settlement, and anyone who could rush in could then grab their land. But when the people who obeyed the law rushed in, they found that people were already there who had claimed the land sooner. They got there sooner than the others because they didn't obey the law, the Oklahoma Sooners.
Cheaters.
Okay, there you go. We follow nice deal law. There's good land there. You're going to wait till Tuesday when you could go on Monday and get it first? All right, enough of that. All right. Now Andrew Jackson runs for re-election. 1832, he's incredibly popular, so he gets re-elected. Now, a lot of times, you have to be careful. Don't just vote for someone because you like them. You should find out what they say they're actually going to do as leader when they are elected. And if you don't like their proposals, then maybe you shouldn't vote for them. Because Andrew Jackson spent the campaign talking about destroying the Bank of the United States, an institution which most Americans would have been favorably inclined towards. Historians today believe that when Americans voted for Andrew Jackson, for re-electing Andrew Jackson, were they voting to destroy the bank or because they liked Jackson? They liked Jackson. But if you vote for someone who says he's going to do something and he gets elected, he'll do that something. Did Germans vote for Hitler in 1933 because they liked their Nazi policies or because the Depression was destroying Germany and they needed someone who said they would be strong to save the country? It was the second.
The second one.
Most of them didn't really even pay attention to much of that racism and anti-Jewish bigotry, and they thought that was just kind of weird. They were hoping that Hitler would stop talking about that stuff when he came to power. That is not what happened. Okay. All right, so Andrew Jackson is now in office for a second time, and he feels strong enough to take on the Bank of the United States, which I remind you, he blamed, like many Americans blamed, for the Panic of 1819. Which I haven't had time to talk about yet in class. Panics are what we used to call depressions, because it's a better definition. Depressions occur when people panic and everybody tries to sell and nobody's willing to buy anymore. And all of a sudden everything that has value loses all of its value overnight. Now back in the 19th century, America was not an industrial nation. We were a farm-based nation. So the ups and downs of our economy were based on the value of land. But when the economy was growing, the cost of an acre of land went up. And when the economy was in trouble, the cost of an acre of land went down. Okay. And I used to say that shows a division. In the 1800s, we were a farm-based nation, and so panics were based on real estate. But come with the 20th century, we became an industrial nation, and panics were then caused by stock market crashes. Until what happened 2 years ago, sir? What caused the recession/depression we are in right now?
Housing.
A property collapse, which I thought we were 150 years past. But there you go. Oh, did we have a stock market crash as well? So we got hit in the head and then punched extremely hard in the stomach. No wonder we hit the ground.
You had no regulation for mortgages.
I know. Yes, I know. But that's the reason. But we cannot deny that a property collapse would cause this economy collapse. And I thought, as an advanced industrial nation, we were past property collapses destroying our economy, but clearly we are not. In fact, in many ways, this begins to show that we are becoming a post-industrial nation. Don't we just buy things and not make them anymore on all the products produced in Asia? And how long can that situation continue before we are past a post-industrial nation and a poor nation instead, again? Well, we'll find out, won't we? Like that commercial I just saw the other day, said in 2030 in China, where they're laughing about how they're the great power and talking over themselves about how all of the Democrats' policies destroyed America. Extremely effective commercial, which I did not see until Election Day. But I bet other people saw it as well. Anyone see that commercial?
What was it?
Very effective. Too late now. So let's talk a little bit about the Bank of the United States before we destroy it. And talk about the man who ran it, the chairman. Remember, the Bank of the United States is not a government agency, even though it has all of the powers of a government agency, an extremely powerful government agency. It is not run by the President or the Secretary of Treasury. It has a chairman of the board. The board is made up of all the largest investors, those men who own the most stock in the Bank of the United States. Pick a chairman, and that chairman's name is Nicholas Biddle, B-I-D-D-L-E. And there's a picture of him in the book, and there's a picture of Andrew Jackson, so I should probably find it now, because there's one thing about these two guys. They both have the largest oversized egos you imagine. They're arrogant bastards who think incredibly great things about themselves and think they are the best people on earth. And I hope you know what happens when two arrogant bastards collide. Things blow up. Arrogant bastards never back down. They expect the other guy to back down. In fact, we'll get back to him again. But you can tell that some of the newspapers weren't too impressed with Andrew Jackson's presidential style. Now, can you tell that this is a criticism? What is this cartoon trying to say before you even read it?
Monarch.
He is acting like an elected president, elected monarch, a dictator. Matter of fact, can you see what that document is? He's ripped up with the seat. That's the Constitution of the United States. And what he's holding in his hand is the veto power, which he uses like a weapon to lord over the American people. That's how people who didn't like Jackson thought about Jackson. And certainly he was extremely arrogant. But so was this man. This is not even a caricature. This is just a painting. You can already see he's an arrogant bastard who thinks a lot about himself. He thinks he's the smartest man in 20 rooms. Okay, you can see that about him. Okay, so that's Nicholas Biddle. Nicholas Biddle understandably believed that he was the most powerful man in the United States, not the President of the United States. Nicholas Biddle, as the chairman of the Bank of the United States, controls all of America's revenue and all of our finances. And he runs the largest corporation, controls interest rates, the issuing of currency. He's got real power. Whereas the president is just an administrator. The Bank of the United States was so much larger than any other corporation that it's not imaginable. There's no use telling you how much money it was worth, $35 million. That doesn't sound like much anymore. But it would have been 10 times. There would not have been another company in America worth several $million. And his company's worth $35 million. He has so much more power than Microsoft does. It's unimaginable. Okay. The money that the Bank of the United States lended to state banks was the investment capital that held up our entire banking system. The Bank of the United States loaned money to other banks, who then loaned money for farmers to buy farms, and for businessmen to start businesses, and industrials to start textile mills. It's the start of the whole process, like the Federal Reserve is today. Which is the process of, we have just decided to print up $600 billion worth of crisp American dollars and use them to buy bonds, to drive up the value of bonds. It's causing the stock market to go through the roof right now, by the way. There's an explosion going on in the stock market at this very moment. It's a fancy move. I hope it works. Very Alexander Hamiltonian move. government's going to step in and just make bonds worth more by buying their own bonds from themselves.
I love how it's like another $600 million, right?
600 billion. 600 billion.
600 billion.
No tax increase. It's economic masturbation. Let's hope it works. Okay. Let's really hope we reach climax. All right. If we don't, it is a huge mistake. If it does not create economic prosperity, it's another $600 billion of debt. Just like that, in a week. Okay, how long can we keep racking up debt like that if we don't have some economic prosperity? However, the Bank of the United States was seen by many Americans as a group of greedy, sneaky northern bankers. New York City bankers with their top hats and their suits who'd never touched the dirt, never had any dirt on their fingernails or sweat on their brow their whole lives, manipulating our entire country. Men like Andrew Jackson. So he's going to have a lot of support when he criticizes the bank. It's going to touch a nerve. And the arrogance of Nicholas Biddle and the stubbornness of Andrew Jackson is what caused the bank to be destroyed. The other board members realized there was a problem. They told Nicholas Biddle, all you need to do is, Andrew Jackson's the Southern gentleman. We all know what happens to traditional Southern gentlemen if you try to be nice to them. You get everything you want, don't you? Isn't that the whole idea of being a Southern gentleman? That if somebody is nice to you, you must be nice back to them. Hospitality. If they're mean to you, you'll punch them right in the face. If they're nice to you, you've got a friend who used to be an enemy. Okay, that's the way you treat Southern gentlemen. And so all Nicholas Biddle had to do was go to the White House, shake the president's hand, and have a conversation with him. And when that conversation was over, everything would have been solved. Except that would have been admitting that the President of the United States is the most important man in America. He told the board, the President of the United States will come to me at the bank, shake my hand, and have a meeting with me. I will not go to him. And of course, Andrew Jackson's not going to back down the slightest. So these two men have no interest in the slightest of compromising or working things out. The problem is actually personal. They don't like each other, and they won't back down in front of each other's faces. In fact, what they really want to do is humiliate each other and crush each other in a battle of wills. 1832, the Bank of the United States was not up for rechartering for another 4 years. It had only been, its second charter, it only existed for 16 years. It had been in existence for 36 years. Andrew Jackson was in the process of getting reelected. He was feeling good about himself. So Nicholas Biddle decided to knock the president down a peg. By acting as the Bank of the United States, he introduced a bill into Congress the way the president can. Can anyone introduce a bill into Congress if they feel like it? Could even I, as a common citizen, get a congressman to support my idea? Yes. So when we say a president introduces a bill, we just mean he's so influential that when he recommends that Congress do something, they do it. And Nicholas Biddle was certainly that influential. So he introduced a bill into Congress to renew the charter 4 years ahead of time. In your face, Andrew Jackson. Ha ha. And it was passed. But he forgot about this thing, didn't he? Yeah, the veto power. Andrew Jackson had the veto power, and he vetoed the rechartering of the bank. And then Nicholas Biddle learned the limitation of power. As the chairman of the Bank of the United States, he had the power to influence half of Congress to bend to his will, but not 2/3. You need 2/3 to override a veto. And almost no one is powerful enough to get 2/3 of people to side with you. If you're that much powerful, people will be afraid of that power and oppose it. So he could not get the 2/3, Nicholas Biddle, to override Jackson's veto. And for the next 4 years, it was just a staring contest. Playing chicken with each other. Neither man would back down. When 1836 came and went, the Bank of the United States lost its charter. It could no longer collect taxes for the American government. And so depositors withdrew all their money. The stockholders sold all the stock, and the Bank of the United States had ceased to exist. It had gone, what happens when companies, instead of going bankrupt, they just close up shop. There's a word for that. Selling everything and shutting down.
Insolvent?
Yeah, they became insolvent. They sold everything, they shut down, they ceased to exist. The Bank of the United States has come to its end. So Jackson has won by being a leader, but he hasn't thought about things. Because who's going to do all the things the Bank of the United States does now for the country now that it no longer exists? Jackson had never even thought about that. He never had exit strategies. Because strong leaders, weak thinkers never do have exit strategies. They invade Iraq and then decide how we're going to govern it, now that it's ours. Oops, no exit strategy. Okay, and Andrew Jackson has the same problem. What's he going to do? In matter of fact, he's got a problem. You are going to read about the introduction to the spoil system yourself. Okay, I'm not going to include it. It'll be worth 1 or 2 points in the essay. And if you don't mention the spoil system, I'll take 1 or 2 points off. But you're going to have to learn it from the book yourself. I don't have time. Because I've been talking about the War of the Bank. And I've now led to the pet banks of the Specie Circular Act. This is a government action. So it should actually have the word act on it, so it makes a little more sense. The Specie Circular Act. Okay. Jackson. Species. What is the word species? It's an old-fashioned word. It has a very particular meaning. Very specific. We just don't use it very much anymore. Species sounds like it comes out of the back of a dog, but it's not. It means money, cash, currency. That which you can use to pay bills and pay off debts is specie. Okay. It's an old-fashioned word. It means money. Specie. Specie circular. Circular is an old-fashioned word for a bill. Any bill that's being pushed around to be voted on is a circular. I can put a circular around and see if you agree with it, because it circulates. Okay, specie circular, a law about currency, American currency. Okay. All right. Self-fulfilling prophecies. Fearing something more than anything else. So taking a series of actions that guarantees that that thing you fear the most happens to you very quickly. Is what human beings do very well, fortunately. Because we often have blind. Why do they put those things on a horse? So they don't look left or right and just run forward. Well, politicians are like that sometimes. They can only see what they're supposed to believe in, and if there are any solutions to problems to the left or the right, they won't look at them. And they just move forward to your doom. Okay. Andrew Jackson attacked the Bank of the United States because he blamed it for the panic of 1819. In 1819, the price of land had been spiraling upwards for 4 years. So that American acres of land out west that should have been sold for only about $1 an acre were being sold for $2 or $2.50 an acre. Now that doesn't sound like much because $1 is so little that double it doesn't mean like much either, huh? So I guess there's no difference. You could buy a $20,000 car or a $60,000 car. It's all the same, right? Is it? Oh, it's the same increase in numbers. All right. So by the time that land got to be $2.50 in America, it was too expensive for farmers to afford to buy land out west. So by the way, what could have caused the price of land to go up that high if farmers couldn't afford it? Because bankers are buying it from each other. It's the same thing that happened with derivatives in the stock market crash we've had many times. It's like a Three Stooges routine. I buy land for $1, sell it to you for $1.25. You sell it to her for $1.50. She sells it to me for $1.75. I sell it to you for $2. You sell it to me for $2.25. You get the idea. Unfortunately what happens when the price is $2.50 and you offer it to me for $2.75.
You don't want it.
I don't want it anymore. And you bought it with borrowed money. And you have to pay that money back right away. And so you end up selling it for a quarter.
Isn't that kind of the same as the government buying up its own bonds?
And or what happened with the mortgages and loaning money to people who can't afford to buy these houses at interest rates that are way too high just so you can make a bonus this month, knowing that that person is going to default and bring down your financial institution, all institutions, the entire world's economy, based on greed. Greed. Greed's the word that we're dealing with. And after 4 years of greed, it's what the game with the chairs and the music and you're floating around, musical chairs. It's capitalism. Musical chairs is capitalism. You get a college degree, you get to sit around a chair. They pull a chair away. Everybody sits down. You don't sit fast enough, you don't get that job. Now let's see if you can make the management. We take away your musical chair, start the game. Well, now you're out. Okay, all the way until there's just one, that's the CEO. Okay. It's another one of these lessons we teach about capitalism and how scary and unpleasant it can really be. So come 1819, no one was willing to buy land anymore. They all sold. People started to go out of business. People who had borrowed lots of money to invest in land lost it all. And instead of the Bank of the United States issuing a bunch of additional currency to keep the country going, they called in all their loans, driving all the remaining banks out of business so they could stay solvent. Okay. Which greatly irritated Americans just as much as we were angry by the TARP, George Bush, Obama program of giving away your future for generations so banks wouldn't have to suffer the slightest. And all they did is belch loudly. Okay, digest the money and move on.
The super rich just control everything.
Well, I'm sorry to say that that is the continuation lecture, point of today's lecture. And if we had time, I would give you the lecture on the Masons, which would absolutely reinforce what I am just saying. We are 10 minutes away from the Mason lecture. We don't have 10 minutes left. But I will give you that Masons lecture on Tuesday. I can't help it.
Sweet.
Okay? Who are the secret organization that runs this country and always has, the super rich. Okay? You get to be a Mason if you are super rich and powerful. If you're not, you don't get to be one. Well, unless, of course, we all know what's the other way you get to be a Mason, like all these organizations?
Family,
By which you mean?
birth,
Legacy.
birthright.
Just turn it into a sentence. How?
You're born into it.
Born into it.
You mean if your father was one before you?
Your father was one.
Yeah.
Same thing for fraternity or sorority.
Yeah.
What's it called when you in a sorority even though you're stupid looking and fat?
Legacy.
Legacy. Okay. But if you don't have a legacy and you're stupid looking and fat, you don't get to go. Period. They're just not even going to invite you. Although they could possibly make fun of you as a pleb and to kick the crap out of you and make you go through 10,000 little hoops until they say, I'm sorry, you're out.
Don't have to be in college.
Huh?
Don't have to be in college.
Do you think I'm that type of a joiner? No, I never came anywhere near. I joined the ultimate frisbee team.
Awesome.
Not a sorority or a fraternity. Well, sorority would be out. I joined the sorority. Okay.
Right.
Jackson will now take actions because of his fear, because he blamed the Bank of the United States for the Panic of 1819, he is now going to take actions that will cause the Panic of 1837. Okay? It will cause them. And the actions he took after he destroyed the Bank of the United States that caused the Panic of 1837 was the creation of the pet banks and the Species Circular Act. So let's get through that real quickly here.
That was the cause of the panic?
Yeah, that's right. As always, when a government takes an action this year, it always goes into effect next year, and so helps or damages next year. We will have no idea whether Obama's health care reform will actually reduce the cost of health care or increase it until it gets implemented, which would be years from now, by which time the Republicans will have voided it, and so we'll never know, because it will have ceased to exist. That's almost certain to happen now. So it was entirely, all that talk about the Obama health care was just so much air. So much air. That's what happens when you make something happen 6 or 8 years in the future. Can't Congress change laws anytime they feel like it? That's why you make things occur immediately, as soon as possible, if you know what you're doing. All right. Now, who's going to collect our country's taxes, and where is that money going to be deposited until it's spent? The president decided to put it in pro-Jackson banks, pet banks, like a teacher's pet. Some banks would endorse one presidential candidate, other banks would endorse other candidates, just like newspapers endorse candidates today. Those newspapers, those banks that had endorsed Jackson now received a massive infusion of free money from the federal government. Dozens of state banks all over America now became our treasury, responsible for collecting taxes, depositing in their banks, giving them an opportunity to make massive loans. In 1836, all of a sudden, every small mom-and-pop operation bank, which had never had more than a few hundred or a few $1,000s in their vaults, and made only what we would call today microloans, now had macro amounts of money to deal with. So much money they didn't know what to do with it. Can banks make money any other way than issuing loans? It is the only way they make money. Is it even right to sit on your money as a banker and not loan it out to someone? Aren't you then thwarting the whole point of a banking institution? You deposit the money in the bank and I loan it over here. The money I make from the interest I charge the loan, I can use to pay the interest to you from the money you deposited. Okay. So these state banks began a wild orgy of loans to land speculators. We use the word orgy when we mean too much sex by too many people all at one time. And so economic orgies are when too many people are buying things all at one time, and too many people are getting too many loans at too much low interest, and it cannot sustain itself. So we have this wild orgy going on in which banks are loaning money to people who are untrustworthy with no credit rating history and no tendency to pay back their loans. These people are taking that money to immediately invest it very riskily in public land out west. People are settling in Illinois, so I'll buy a bunch of land in Kansas or Wisconsin. Then I'll hold on to that land for 5 or 10 years, and when farmers move there, I'll sell it to the farmers. Or that doesn't sound good. I'll buy it today and sell it tomorrow, and then buy more land on Wednesday and sell more of it on Thursday, buy more land on Friday and sell more of it on Saturday, playing this game. East Coast investors who never intended to do anything with the land, who are buying it just to sell it as soon as possible to rake in a profit, like an entrepreneur. That, as you might expect, that can't stand. The amount of land being sold begins to arch upwards. Now here is the increase. Here's how much land is really worth. $1 or $2 an acre. All the way through this time, this is how much the land is really worth. But in the first bubble, it went up from, this is how much land is being sold. This is how much land can be sold at $1 or $2 an acre to farmers who actually want the land. This is a completely artificial bubble created by bankers and investors artificially bidding up the price of land by buying it from each other, selling it to other investors because of all that easy access loan, until finally in 1836, 20 million acres of land are sold, all to bankers who don't want it. And at some point the land becomes so valuable that no one will buy it anymore. They all try to sell, and it drops right back down to its original level, just like a rock, collapsing the entire economy, creating a 4 or 5 year depression, a gigantic depression. Boom and bust of selling all this land all fast, too many loans happening too quickly. Andrew Jackson is just smart enough to realize that he's caused a gigantic problem. He's only got a few months left in the White House. He's got to find a way to solve it. And he decides to solve it by making things twice as bad as before. The Species Circular Act, the last thing for today, the cause of the Panic of 1837. Species Circular Act. Jackson decided the problem was that we had dozens of different paper denominations. We had dozens of state banks, all of them issuing paper currency, all of them in circulation against each other, drawing down their value. So he pushed through Congress a law stating that if you wanted to buy public land out west from the government, you had to use gold or silver coins. Paper currency would no longer be accepted. How much paper currency was in people's pockets at this point? Large amounts. And how much was it now worth when the government said they wouldn't accept it as currency?
Nothing.
Worthless. And what did that cause? A massive economic collapse. Everything collapsed at the same time. And it's all Andrew Jackson's fault. What he wanted most not to happen, he took the actions which caused it. Okay. Very good. And that's a perfect place to stop for today. I have only about a few minutes left of stuff to say. I would like to spend half of Tuesday's class answering any questions you might have about the test, about the study guide terms I did not have time to cover. And then when we're halfway through the class, I'm going to move into test number 4. Okay? So we will begin the material for test number 4 on Tuesday. Very good.
That's your masonry then?
Huh?
So will you give the mason?
Yeah, I'll give my Masons from the country lecture. Yes, I will. I promise I will give my miniature version of my Masons from the country lecture.
I actually know a couple guys who their dad's a mason and they're
You do?
they're douchebags.
Ah.
But their dad's rich.
Oh, you are? I'm not surprised.
I came in 5